Welcome to Insight. Today we address the issue of children out of school due to COVID 19 and parenting challenges.
What overall should parents, guardians, loved ones, whoever they are, be doing at this time?
Well, Michael, you can imagine that if you still have to be at work and your children are at home, that will present some anxieties. So, my advice to parents is that they are to still try and find someone in the community who they trust, who is responsible, who they can sit down and figure out what boundaries they're to put in place for children and what the boundaries are in terms of them being the caregiver for the moment, and try to see if those persons or that person will be able to look after the children until you get back home. I want to also say though that I don't know that there are bosses that are so harsh that wouldn't try to work out something at this time. The children, in fact, are going to be left alone at home. The children, if they're alone at home, will be susceptible to many, many things, and we're really trying to advocate that parents' first responsibility would be to protect the children. So we're looking for a community of care. We're hoping that there still exists in the community persons we can truly trust. But of course, it's very important that boundaries are set. That if you're asking someone to look after your child, then it's going to take a conversation between you and that person so that you know what the limits are. What does taking care of my child for these hours look like? So that everybody is on the same page. And of course, we are also advocating that even in your absence, you try to create some kind of structure for your child. So you must make a list of the things you expect your child to do in the day. As the Ministry of Education, certainly an agency of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, we have said that schooling must continue. So even though children are at home, we expect certain structures to be in place. The ministry has given several sites, for example, where children can have access to materials so their schooling can continue, that learning must continue. I want to say that the brain is a muscle. And so if there is too much of a break, then we will have a hard time getting our children back in the groove, getting them back ready. And that's not what we want. So routines as best as possible should be maintained.
Let me ask this. You say take care of your child, setting the boundary. It sounds like a work.
Yes.
People should be paid?
You know, that depends on who the caregiver is going to be, because it really is a lot of work. It's interesting that you said that, because I was talking to a friend of mine this morning and she said this is work. She's at home with her children. It's so much work. So much work is coming from the school. So it is a lot to ask somebody, especially if that person has children of his or her own. Then it's additional work. So maybe a part of the conversation would be, could I help you by providing money or some other service, I don't know, so that we don't feel as if it's too much of an imposition and it's not too much work, because it really is a lot to ask.
We often hear the saying, one size don't fit all. I'm sure even as you suggest certain things, we know it doesn't fit all, and especially those on the lower, rung of the socioeconomic ladder, where some people have challenges with their children. Their children are challenging. They fall off the the map ever so often, and their special needs is how, what do we do?
Well, that's quite a question, Michael. So let me take it in two parts. There are children who present with behaviors that can be challenging, let's face it. And many times that stems from situations where there's no structure in the home, where children are not used to boundaries, they're not used to rules, they're not used to anybody saying this is a time to sit, this is a time to get up, this is a time to do chores. They're not used to those kinds of structures. So you can imagine, especially if you're going to ask somebody to sit with your child now who in that home there's structure, those children are going to have a problem adapting. For those children, I would still strongly suggest that they be given enough information, depending on the age and stage, to say exactly why it is critical at this time that they adhere to all the boundaries, because we're really trying to protect the children, and we're really trying not to make a bad situation even worse. For those parents of children with special needs, that continues to be an area of real concern. Special needs is so wide, and disabilities in general, there are 13 categories of disabilities, and then special needs is really wide because it encompasses any limitation, if you will. So for those parents of children with disabilities or special needs, depends on what the disability is, that will take a whole different set of preparation. For parents who have children with physical disabilities, it will be interesting how you're going to now get the community involved for bathroom breaks and just for just regular moving around, to get to the assignments, to get next door. It's a whole different kind of arrangement. For those with learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities, that's a whole other group too. It means you have to break down the information as it comes from the school if it were not broken down before, to chunk the information. They might be able to handle all the material that's being sent to them. They have to do it in parts. There are children who are on the autism spectrum, and that's a whole other, there are 5 different categories of autism, so it's a whole lot of different kinds of arrangements. So you're right, one size doesn't fit all.
And then we have wheels within wheels.
Yes.
You send children, even in the normal times, you'd have these challenges. But herein lies the other challenge. It's called COVID-19.
Yes.
And therefore you leave the children, but you are hoping and praying even more, added stress, that the protection there at that location is one that is in keeping with the protocols of health.
Absolutely. So you want the entire community to have the same kind of values. No, these are the principles and the beliefs that we hold dear, and that you have to trust that what the government officials are saying is what's best for us. So practice really good hygiene. Make sure there's water, running water, and if not, use bottled water at this point to wash your hands, or get the hand sanitizers. For me, there's nothing better than soap and water. So teach your children how to really thoroughly wash their hands, and how just to keep safe, how to cover their mouths, how if they have to cough.
Suspect a lot of people are now learning how to
Absolutely.
cough properly.
Right, in the arms. So it's a community that we're really asking everybody to take it very seriously, but at the same time, not to the point where we're so frightened that we become debilitated, because if you're scared, that can be debilitating to where you just can't do anything.
Yes.
And that's not what we want. We want you to actively get the right information from the government officials and listen to those guidelines very carefully and practice. Encourage each other. We're looking out for each other now and ensure we're doing the right things.
There are 2 things that stresses my mind at this time. One, the risks that some parents will take of leaving their young ones at home by themselves. We know the dangers, we've seen it. What would you say to parents that would say, all right, you're a big boy now, you're a big girl now, and leave their little ones at home because them said they now have no choice?
Yes, but as tough as it is, and I understand the economics very well, I understand that if you don't go to work, then you're going to have a challenge providing. But may I just say, your number one priority, especially at this time, when this is a reality, we're in an urgent space right now. Your number one priority is the safety of your child. Have a conversation with your boss. He or she should not be that hard. Say what the reality is. I don't think the best thing is to take children to the workplace at this time anyhow, so that's just not an option. Find out, is there something, if there's some way that we can make up for the time that you're now going to lose because you have to stay home. Can we work out something that after this whole thing passes, that I give back extra hours, because your priority has to be your child. I know it's difficult. I understand it. I'm not sitting here thinking that it's all hunky-dory. I'm not. I'm a realist too. So please have those conversations And at the same time, if you're still having challenges, call the commission. Maybe we can step in on your behalf. Maybe I'm able to articulate what's going on, because really we don't want to compound the situation. I don't want to hear that children have been left unattended and as a result they're hurt. We're not going to be able to deal with that on top of everything else that's going on.
And hurt does not mean just a fire.
Hurt does not mean a fire. Hurt, even the persons within the community sometimes, unfortunately, within the family, hurt our children. And that is why we have to figure out, really think about who you're going to leave them with, have serious conversations about what this care looks like, what are the expectations, have conversations too with the children, because they also need to know what the boundaries are that were established, so that if anyone in whose charge a child was left steps out of line, then that child should feel free and safe enough to say to the parents. It really is tricky, but we continue to pray and just hope that all will go well and this will blow over very quickly.
The other troubling situation is that, alas, too many of our parents are separated. The children are from so-called broken homes, and therefore they're swinging in between the two, or not seeing one or the other. And in a simple term, the support is not in place. This could exacerbate the situation, and hopefully it could bring things together. But we're looking at some dark times.
Yes. So for those families that have been broken, there's a split where mother and father just do not communicate. This is a wonderful time to put aside all the grievances. It's a wonderful time to focus on what's important. And what's important now is the safety of our children. Sometimes support is not always physical, because there's social distancing that we're practicing now, my God.
Yes.
And maybe you want to limit visits to the home, but we have technology. So there's Skype, and there is all of them,
Yes.
FaceTime, and,
Yes.
and all the other things that we're in the digital age, that you can still have that kind of relationship with the estranged parent and the child. You can still try to foster that, and use the opportunity to really focus on what's important. Sometimes things happen in families, and they're really trivial things that cause the family to break down. Yes.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Insight. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking to Keisha Carr, CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, and Janet Cupidon Coelho, Child Protection Specialist.
Let me task you now. It's night. In the morning, you're going to face 24 more hours. And you are home with the kids, or the kids are left with somebody who hopefully is doing well. How do you partition that day? Because the TV and the Netflixes and what have you can be the entertainer to pass the hours. But it's 14 days, 7 days, or whatever. Some of it has gone. But here we are having to face the drill of a day. What would you bring in practical terms? Some of us parents will have to be at home with these kids.
Well, I'm speaking very specifically now to you parents who are already at home and staying with your children, and some of you are dreading it already. There's so many things you can do. So outside of providing the structure that we really are pushing for the children in terms of their schoolwork, there has to be a system where you have breaks. It's a wonderful bonding time for family. And children can be so creative. So use it. We could be doing coloring with their small children. There are adult coloring books too. I was coloring not so long ago. It's a wonderful time to play cards and dominoes and that game called Sticks. I don't know if it's still around. And tic-tac-toe and just fun things in the home. And then of course you can also go outside together and take fresh air, because that's important too, and breathe in the fresh air and come back inside. But it's a wonderful time to be creative. to tell stories. Oh my goodness, that was a good pastime when I was a child. I'd listen to stories. So tell stories and catch up, because the truth is we really, in a busy world, sometimes we miss each other and we miss important. It's a wonderful time just to catch up, to say what really has been happening for the last week or 2 weeks, or what concerns do you have. But, in everything there are positives, and I believe that it presents a real positive note for family bonding. And for those of you whose spouses are coming in from overseas and you have those heebie-jeebies, like that call I got this morning, just to do what the officials have said, their self-isolation until the time passes, and respect that is what has to happen now, and it will pass. It gets better.
You brought up an issue of parents who are now a serious lump in their throat, those who are away trying to earn some money for their kids to go through, who might very well be forced to come back, and in so doing will have to get a 14 days suspension of movement. This could exacerbate things. And what is the disposition, the mental disposition that would take us through and give us the grit to go through this?
Well, there was one parent I spoke to this morning. She was crying because she didn't want her husband to come. So that's an interesting twist. I'm laughing, but it's so not funny. And it was agony for her, because she's thinking, oh, he's going to come and perhaps he's going to expose the 2 children. So I know there's real mental health issues, especially some persons who have to be locked away. They feel locked away for an entire day or 14 days. It can be a bit much, but I still believe that you can get through it. Human beings are very resilient, and we've been through a whole lot as human beings. This too we will get through. It is what is best for your family at this time. So find ways to pass the time as you self-isolate. Read a book. There are many good books out there, many books online. And think of it of your way as you're protecting your family and protecting yourself. Yes.
Very well. I'm going to slip over to another lady here who undoubtedly must have some thoughts of her own, but in her capacity, UNICEF, in the best of times, what's the remit of UNICEF? What is it that they do?
The United Nations Children's Fund is an important part of the United Nations system worldwide, and of course here in Jamaica. UNICEF promotes and supports the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. That's an important document that many governments have signed off on, including the Jamaican government, which sets out what the rights of children are. And unlike how some people think of it, it's not a document that is there to give children license to do whatever they want to do. It sets out what children need in order to survive and to be protected from harm. And one of the rights of the child is a right to good health, access to good health and to well-being, and also protection from violence, exploitation, and abuse. During times of emergencies, UNICEF is particularly careful to support government agencies and the civil society organizations that are out there working to protect children and to ensure their good health. And so this is what UNICEF does in all of this. That's our context.
And those are the best of times. But we are now in the worst of times. Is there a shifting of the philosophy or the operationalizing, if you may, of these rights and whatever agreement governments have tied to the United Nations?
Well, rights are important at all times, whatever the context. But in times of emergencies, UNICEF will put more focus on supporting the activities that are targeted to children and their families and caregivers. The caregivers are also important because, they provide the environment that keeps children safe and happy. So right now, UNICEF Jamaica, like other UNICEF offices across the world, are putting more focus on what we can do to help government, as well as civil society, community-based organizations, to give special assistance to children and their families. And one of the things that we're concerned about now is the information that's going out to families and children. A lot of misinformation is going out along with the good information.
Yes.
So our intention is to work with our partners such as the National Parenting Support Commission, the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, of which the Parenting Commission is a part. We work with the Early Childhood Commission, with the Child Protection and Family Services Agency. These are some of our agencies that are established to care for children in various ways. So we are looking at supporting their activities at this time to further enhance and to provide that extra support that children and families need at this time.
You mentioned the word focus, but there's also a word that starts with F that means funds. Is it tied to that, or is it just repurposing what is out there?
So UNICEF provides support through technical assistance, first of all, and also through funding support. So at times such as these, we try to get our hands on additional funding, to mobilize additional funding, usually from outside of the country, to ensure that the needed activities are indeed funded. So we will be working, for instance, with the Ministry of Health to produce some videos that sends the message out to children about what they need to do to care for themselves in a child-friendly way. We're working with the Parenting Support Commission, which plans to do some enhanced work with its parenting mentor leaders in order to ensure that families get the kind of stronger psychosocial support that they may need and will need at this time in order to create the right environment for their children. So yes, there is some funding support that goes along with the technical assistance.
I can only imagine the work of the UNICEF and what insurmountable the work is. Because I see pictures of kids in Syria learning how to hide from bombs. And here we are now learning how to hide from COVID-19. Do you, in any form or way or shape, assist with the shaping of, you guys should make this the priority because we have learned this elsewhere. Do you get into, does UNICEF locally get into that type of situation? That's a good plan. Yes, we'll go for this instead of this.
We always do this in times of emergency and in times when there are no emergencies. So yes, already we have been sharing with our partners websites, resource material that has been developed by our head office and by other UNICEF offices across the world and by other UN partners and even by non-UN partners.
Yes, yes.
Anything that we have been able to get our hands on, which we think is also relevant for the Jamaican situation, we have already been sharing this with our partners. So yes, we believe in sharing good practices.
Information and intelligence. I'm going to class you as the mother of the world, United Nations, taking care of children. What is it that you would say now to the children of the world, and specifically the children in Jamaica, who have found themselves at home? Some will be enjoying it, perhaps like me, who didn't really care about school until you should have cared. What can you tell them now as they're looking at you and say, you perhaps never had this experience, but give us the wisdom of your years?
Well, first of all, I'd like to endorse the good advice that Casey just shared. And I can hardly add anything more to that, but I would say stay calm. I would say listen to the good information that's coming from the Ministry of Health and those of our kids who are on social media, and so many of them are, do not be taken in by everything that is sent to you. There is a lot of deliberate misinformation. There is some of the misinformation that is just misguided, but I would say to them, be very careful about sharing some of the videos and what have you that you come across through the various social media. You have a responsibility, although you are kids, to also ensure that good information is passed around. I would also say, do not bully other kids who you think may be unwell. Unfortunately, bullying is a common practice with many of our kids, and so I'd say to them, be careful of that. Do not do that. Do not bully other kids, because you think they may be sick, and then you create great discomfort for them. I think I would also say, try to cooperate with your parents, because they themselves they are somewhat anxious.
Very anxious, yes.
Yes. So everybody needs to, try to be patient with each other. This is a good time for sharing and caring. And I think, I think if they stick to that, it would stand them in good stead. I think this is a good time for us to reach out to each other, although we have to keep our social distance.
Yes.
There are ways in which we can show our kindness and our consideration, and kids can do that as well. There's one very, very other important thing that I must say. UNICEF has found that in emergencies, children become more vulnerable. Yeah? So I would also say to the kids, if anybody is trying in any way to take advantage of you, to abuse you in any way, let a trusting adult know. As Casey was saying, it could be a member of the family, it could be a neighbor, because very often it's persons who the children know who are their abusers and exploiters. And in times of emergency, when many persons are focusing on dealing with the urgent situations, sometimes they're distracted and we don't pay as close enough attention to the kids. And persons who hurt children will take advantage of these moments.
Yes.
So kids, be careful.
Okay. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Insight. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking to Keisha Carr, CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, and Janet Cupidon-Coelho, Child Protection Specialist.
I'm going to put a proposal to you. I've not written it up in any document as you would normally get it from the UNICEF. It has just come to mind. Teachers who normally interface with our children for the longer periods of the day than their own parents. And what if a teacher in a neighborhood, not calling out everybody from different neighborhoods or what have you in a circle, wouldn't that person be a good person to say, leave your kids with? Because they're not in school, so we have some adults at home who we trust. So perhaps on that street, you can say, we can assemble here, no more than 20, of course. Not violating that. Is that hurting some of the protocols, or we could work on that?
Well, when Casey was giving her advice earlier on, she used the word trusted. That's the operative word all the time. Because a person who may seem like the ideal person may be the worst person for you to select. So you really need to know who you're leaving your kids with. And you parents need to listen to what your kids have to say and trust them If they see that something has gone wrong, it's not right, please don't leave me there because in the past so and so has made me feel uncomfortable. Then you don't.
Or we can look at the body language. They might not speak.
That's true. Sometimes even in their artwork,
That's right.
they express certain things.
Yes. Man to man is so unjust. We don't know who to trust. I put a proposal to UNICEF and they have not bought it at all. Would you fix it up and sell it to them for me in terms of trusting? We teachers have passed the trust test for the most part. And we could find in instances where parents are essential service. And sometimes two persons in the household belong to the essential service in the real terms. Would that be a good place to want to find out if you could leave your child?
Michael, I always have the parenting hat on, and many teachers are parents too. And the same heebie-jeebies the regular parent is feeling are the same heebie-jeebies that these teachers are feeling who are parents. I think sometimes we forget that behind the titles are real people. So it would definitely be up to that teacher whether or not that teacher would want to be giving of his or herself, giving of him or herself, correct that, at this time. And also, I still have to come back to that same word, trust. I think many times we're misguided where we trust the titles instead of looking to trust the person. So we're not saying leave the children with a pastor or a teacher or a barrister or whomever. We're saying make sure you know the person and know the person well. And even so, that conversation, very frank conversation as to what your expectations are of the person in whose care you're leaving your children must be had. You must sit down and say, what am I expecting and what are the boundaries? Okay, so should my child do something that you feel is out of line? What are the expectations? So everything needs to be put on the table.
Oh, that's a long conversation.
Yes, but it's such an important one. Your child is really the most precious gift.
And you alone know how to raise your child. Nobody else can raise your child.
And whereas I don't subscribe to that because we really advocate for the entire community to care for each child, the fact though is that there are different value systems. Persons have different ways of disciplining children. And so you want to have the conversation to say, okay, so should my child step out of line? Should he or she have erred? What are we going to do? Do you place a call to me? What are you permitted to do?
Can you paint a tool lick?
Without violating. Well, we certainly are not advocating for that kind of abuse. The Parenting Support Commission stands firmly behind the Prime Minister's pronouncements and UNICEF on corporal punishment. Absolutely no spanking of children. Discipline is just structure. And we're coming back to that all the time, that put the structures in place so that the children can understand what those are, the routines. And of course, in all of that too, there must be some amount of fun because they would have been having some amount of fun at school as well.
Yes.
So it's not all stringent where they're going to be learning how to be fun as well.
Yes. Help me now. We're going to play a kids game because they're so creative when you see them play even by themselves. Let's play some what ifs. Let us think beyond today. How will we know that we've passed the worst? I'm not talking about the amount of cases, but in terms of the healthy minds that's coming. Because there are exams that they're going to miss. There are going to be anxieties for some kids who are driven. They want to be great. How will we know that at the end of this, we would have been successful?
Well, it's very important that we remain attuned and in tune to what our children are feeling and what they're saying. So that's a very good question, Michael. So COVID is a thing of the past, but how do we know that our children remain okay and the parents remain okay? We're speaking now about mental health issues. We have to look for signs of, with children, withdrawal and signs of just prolonged periods of sadness or depression. And parents too, it's very important that we talk to persons or the adults about what we're feeling. It's okay to say, I am scared. It's okay to say that, I'm uncertain. It's okay to say this is challenging. We're not superheroes. I gave up that cape a long time ago, and I don't intend to get it. We're not superheroes. We're just people. And so, for our own mental well-being, it is very important that we're talking about our feelings and accepting that it's a scary time, but also to watch our children very carefully, so that we know whether or not they're really handling these uncertain times well.
Yes.
Yes.
Should we document? Because I get the sense that we're on we're standing at the bridge of history. We have no precedent out there. Nobody can say, when this happened, we did this. No, we're all in this together learning. This is a movie with not a timeline, but a lifeline, and we're all in it together. Should we document, especially if we're observing our children, and to see to what extent there might have been some affectation, if you may, or whatever?
I think that's a brilliant idea, Michael. There's an observation schedule that we sometimes keep. Depending on what parents would have come to the commission for, we do encourage them to keep an observation schedule where they're doing just that, documenting based on their own observations what they see, how children behave. And perhaps it's a good time to say, the first 7 days, the child was just up and running and everything was fine and was attending to all the expectations and everything was good. Nothing outside of the ordinary, but as at day 8, some things started to change. I think that's an important thing. If you can, certainly would be good to write those things down, not just about health, the physical health concern, but behavior,
Yes.
the social behaviors.
And of yourself as well,
and of yourself, absolutely. So, and that would be good just for society to see, what's happening. Maybe those are things we could share with the commission and share with UNICEF, so that we could respond. And then, of course, it would guide us for future crises. We're not hoping that we'll have any more, but
I'm sure we will.
It's just a different kind of time that we're living in, and so it perhaps is a good thing that you could document. And it's also important just to check in with your children. My son is grown, but he's home from UE, and every morning and throughout the day I call to say, are you okay? Are you okay? It's very important that I know that he's okay, and I look him in the eyes too, to make sure that he's not just telling me what he thinks I want.
Poor
to
boy.
hear. Yes, but even so, it's important
Yes.
to check in. Are you okay? And if you're not, spend that extra minute or so to find out what's going on and see what we can do to get that result.
And hopefully there will be a lot of healing.
Yes.
At the end of it,
Yes.
hopefully we can all say, from evil came good, and not from evil came worse.
Yes. It is also a time of reflection, and it's a time to get back to our center. It forces you to think about what's truly important. So many times we're in this rat race and we're just rushing, and many persons are just trying to accumulate, and we're rushing and we miss the important moments. Here's an opportunity where we have to be so deliberate about everything. We have to stop and take care of ourselves. We have to stop and wash our hands thoroughly. And we have to stop and really check, and we have to take our vitamins and eat well. We have to pause and get back to what's important. We have to check in with the children in real ways, and we have to listen. So many times in the busy world you say, are you okay? And you don't even listen for the answer. You assume the answer is going to be yes. So now we're forced to pause. And so, like you rightly said, Michael, in everything there is a positive. Let us get back to those human connections. So certainly we have to keep social distancing, but there are other ways to connect. It's good to just pick up the phone and say, are you okay? And really listen for an answer and share.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Insight. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking to Keisha Carr, CEO of the National Parenting Support Commission, and Janet Cupidon-Coelho, Child Protection Specialist.
Let's check in with, you know, UNICEF again. We left at a point when you spoke to the importance of the information that's coming through. In a world not so long ago, the issue of technology was not as pervading. But yet it is the same technology that you are saying, let's be careful about, that is now the platform to get the goodies to the kids. And therefore their ability now to determine in this flood of information which one they should take. It therefore means to me that parents will have to be involved even at that level as to ensure that the information is not some kind of a poison.
Well, the work that UNICEF will be doing with its partners over the next several weeks, maybe months, is going to be targeting both parents and the children. And we will be using quite a variety of social media to get the information out. So we will be targeting some messages to parents to let them know what to expect, what they should communicate, how they should communicate it, you know, to listen to the kids, hear what they have to say before you start talking, get a sense of what they know, and then you add to it or correct their misinformation if there has been misinformation. And we are going to be using, you know, community theatre and all sorts of media to reach to parents and children, and also to support them in creating the messages that they themselves can pass on.
We should challenge our children, for example, as we document. Perhaps they should document their days electronically. It's day one in this family, this is what we do. So give the kids something to do.
Yes, that is an excellent idea. And I think it's one of the suggestions that has already gone out. And I like what you're saying about documenting. Yes, the kids can document. We, the persons who are delivering services, also need to document and evaluate, monitor and evaluate what we are doing. Because I think that out of this experience is gonna come some good practices that Jamaica can actually share with other countries.
Yes.
Yes. And I think too that out of the new initiatives that we will implement because of our response to COVID-19, will come some new programming which we can sustain beyond the emergency, that will enhance the quality of and the scope of the services that we provide to children and their caregivers.
Give me a sunny side up overview, if you may. The world will never be the same again, will it? Will we be better for this because of this?
I think that we can be better for this. We have to look for the opportunities to learn new lessons and to create and to, because that is what is going to help us to overcome this. And I think we will do it. I think Jamaica will do it. I think the world will do it. And even take something as simple as a hand washing, and the other hygiene, you know, practices that are being encouraged. I think a lot of that is going to stay with us for a long time.
I'll miss hugging though.
I'm sure we will come back to a time when we can hug again, you know. But I think some of the health practices will stay with us because we will be forced to repeat those things every day. I think they will stay with us for a long time. So we probably will have a healthier planet.
There you go. And give me a sunny side up capsule of how we can come out of this. Will we be better off because of it?
Well, I certainly hope so, and I have all faith. You know, I still have faith, a whole lot of faith in humanity. I do believe we have the wherewithal to come out of this even better than we were before. So many times world over, all we hear are the bad things, but here's an opportunity to just have all the good things. There is so much good that media entities are going to have a hard time finding the bad to report. I do believe in humanity, and I do believe that when in times of crisis, we find the resolve to do what we know is right. It is also a wonderful time for us to recognize our own spirituality and our connections to something that is greater than who we are. At this time, it does feel a little helpless to an extent that, COVID is here. There's nothing that anyone can do about it. But there is a greater orchestrator, and so it presents another opportunity too for us to connect with something that's bigger than who we are. Get back to that center and recognize that we are great as human beings, but there's something that's greater. So yes, I do believe we can come out better. I do believe that at the end of this, we'll love a little more. We'll be happier people. We'll have a bit more joy. And we'll understand too that at the end of it all, there are only a few things that are important. And one of those few things happens to the family.
So left for me to say thank you very much to both of you. I've often seen a lot of movies that when we found that there was an extraterrestrial being, it brought the world together. And this is our extraterrestrial being, because it is an enemy we can't see, but we must fight. And because of that fight, we're not fighting each other, but fighting together. And I believe that together, the media, UNICEF, and the Parent Commission can make it a victory. I thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you too.
Thank you very
Keep
much.
safe.